Hey everyone, welcome to Meyerside Chats. Today we have Eva Posner. I'm so excited. Eva is a political renaissance woman. She's filled roles in field fundraising, management, operations, and communications in dozens of Democratic campaigns and political organizations across the country. She's overseen million-dollar races with national attention, grassroots school board races with no staff, and everything in between. She opened Evinco Strategies in 2016 to focus on electing candidates who increase representation in government, specializing in first-time candidates from diverse backgrounds who face barriers in traditional campaigns, as well as issue campaigns that tackle systemic justice. She's passionate about social and criminal justice, local and state level campaigns, diverse representation in politics, and training the next generation of political operatives. Prior to her work in politics, she worked as a journalist with a focus on government, human trafficking as well. And she is a member of the Truman National Security Project, earned her bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Tennessee. Eva, hi.
Hi, Nick. How are you? Evan.
How-
Not Nick. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I look like a Nick.
Yeah, well, so you kind of do, but also I have another recording right after this with a Nick, and I think I just flipped him in my head. I'm so sorry.
I'm sure he's a great guy.
I
Any Nick that looks like me, or
Hi, Evan. How are you?
hi, good to see you. Happy holidays, happy Thanksgiving, merry, joy, all the things.
I gotcha.
So let's do a brief intro if you can about yourself and a little bit about why you started Evinco Strategies and what that role, taking on that role for people running for office looks like
Yeah.
for you.
So, like you
Yeah.
said, I went to the University of Tennessee, grew up in the South. So I'm from Louisiana, Mississippi, Virginia, or Tennessee, depending on the conversation I'm having and what mood I'm in that day, based on how much I moved around as a kid. And then I moved to California after college, and I was based in San Diego. I was working in journalism. And I got my degree. My specialization was actually in political journalism, and so I, have been politics adjacent my entire adult life. I've always been very interested in how decisions get made, who's allowed in the room, why, etc. And so it wasn't a huge leap when I decided to go, to leave journalism and go into the campaign world, which happened in 2013. I was pregnant with my son, and the Sandy Hook shooting happened, and I had this moment of, oh shit, the world is actually a really scary place. And I'm about to like leave it to this kid, right? And he's going to inherit this from me. And so you know, I have to do something to try to fix what I can. And I have a lot of respect for journalism done well. But I also, there is a different role in the world in, you know, accountability and exposing problems than there is to trying to be in the room when someone's fixing the problem to actively try to fix it. And so I wanted to be on the fixing side, I decided. And I started working in campaigns, took an internship and then a campaign management position. Um, and my first race, I had no idea what I was doing. It was a county assessor's race, real sexy. And, countywide in San Diego is more voters than a governor's race in 22 states. So it was like a really big voter universe to bite off for my first time, but also so far down ballot, nobody gave a shit. So that was a good combination of factors to kind of let me learn how to do everything. After that, I went to work for a fundraising firm. Loved my boss, loved that job. But really wanted to do more than just fundraising. I kind of consider myself a Jane of all trades, if you will. And I really wanted to kind of diversify my skill set, and diversify the services that I was using or providing. So I decided to go out on my own between kind of wanting to do more than what I was doing at work every day for the fundraising firm, but then also seeing other consultants that I had been working with on some of those races do what I considered to be subpar work. They were lazy, they were old school, they were stuck in the way that you know, things had always been, and I didn't want to listen to any of them. I didn't want to have a boss. Um, and so I guess it really comes down to the fact that I don't like to do what I'm told. I like to set my own path. And so I went out of business for myself in 2016. And have been doing it ever since. Evinco is what I call full service consulting firm. So we will help you raise the money and we'll help you spend it. So everything from, locking you in a closet to do call time and helping you with your fundraising events or text messages, fundraising emails, etc., to the part where it's time to outreach to voters. So, writing ads or mailers, yard signs, coming up with field programs, telling you which doors to knock, those kinds of things. So it's really both sides of the campaign. And my version of consulting is a little more hands-on than most general consultants. So it's somewhere hybrid between consulting and campaign management. But because we work with first-time candidates who, you know, are they don't know what they don't know. We've really found that it's important not to just tell people what to do, but to show them how to do it and to be partners with them along the way.
Great. Yeah. I mean, your experience also in so many different states, right, has made, I'm sure, given you some perspective that crosses political lines, right? You've been in California, Mississippi, if I remember, Louisiana, Virginia.
Yes.
So you've it's interesting. You've been able to, and at the same time, so 3 of those states would be considered normally red,
Mm-hmm.
right? And one of them dominantly,
Mm-hmm.
super dominantly blue. And how is that? And now you live in Virginia, yeah?
Yes.
Yes. So how has that changed? This must be put your really shape how you think about these things, because you also handle only Democratic campaigns. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So put these together here for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think part of it is just being able to see what makes a community unique. Being able to talk to people, meet them where they're at, um, but also seeing the things that they actually have in common that they may or may not understand. San Diego, California has a ton in common with Virginia, actually, like a ton. The way that the economy functions, the makeup of the voters, the fact that it is actually much more purple than it is blue. A lot of those things are things that people assume that they have opposite of folks, and then they actually don't. And one of the things that's really been interesting for me my entire adult life, essentially, or really spanning backward, is if you're Southern, California has this reputation of being like this hippie hellscape, and nobody ever wants to go to California. You're not supposed to nobody likes California. California is this boogeyman that is used against people to keep them from having certain opinions, or particular political opinions or societal opinions about how things are shaped. Whereas if you're in California, then the entire South is written off into these rednecks who don't know what's good for them. They're hateful. They're all these other things. And so there's all of these assumptions that people have. And all of those assumptions have been levied at me at some point. I found it really difficult to find a job when I got to California because I had a degree from the University of Tennessee and a Southern accent. And then moving back to Virginia, I've found it difficult to break in here, even though I was raised here, because people see California and they don't want California in their politics. And so, in California, they assume I'm like this super moderate, may as well be a Republican. And in Virginia, I'm like a progressive, socialist pig. It really is extremely interesting to see how those things work out. But for me, it's really allowed me to see both the common ground that we have as Americans, and that things that we all think are important, even though we think somebody else thinks something else, to battle a lot of my own assumptions. And it's also allowed me to see the things that really do make a community unique, the different cultures that we have as a country. I mean, our country is bigger than some continents. So like it's a it's a very diverse place, and meeting people where they're at is actually really hard to do on a
Yeah.
massive scale. And so I think it's given me a lot of respect for the diversity of the American voter.
Yeah. Yeah. You said a lot of interesting things there, and the idea of, eh, what it brings up for me is I think people are different than their government, and the things that they talk about that they see at the latest thing with their historical understanding of, the evil nature of the other party.
Mhm.
It's like it's such top level stuff. It doesn't get to the heart of what people really care about at all, unfortunately, which is mostly the same stuff. Safety. Be hard pressed to find a person who doesn't value public safety. I guess the question is, do you value it in Sometimes it's about whether you value something more than, say, let's just use climate, for example. What's more important to run on as your first priority, public safety or climate, environment related
Right.
stuff?
Well, and where that value comes from, because just because you value something does not mean that you're approaching it in the same way. Some people approach climate change from an existential human crisis perspective. Some people approach it from an economic green jobs perspective. Both are correct. Some people approach public safety from a like response times and resources for first responders perspective, and some people, take it from a mass surveillance and police state perspective, and both are correct. The things that make people feel safe, the things that make people feel seen, they may end up being the same umbrella issue, but there's a different way of getting there. There's a different factor at play for them in how they interact with their government.
Right. Um, we talked a bit about the political industrial complex and its effect on the work that you do. Can you explain a little bit, when you hear the term political industrial complex, what that means to you and how it affects the work that you do?
Yeah, so I actually think I may have coined it. I don't know, but I've been saying it a lot lately, over the last like year, and it kind of hit me one day as I was thinking through, some of the other complexes we're very well. We'll use the military industrial complex or the prison industrial complex as examples. That there are these industries that they prioritize making money at the end of the day over the impact they're having on human lives. And politics has gotten to that point, and I think it's much worse than people understand. It is much bigger than Citizens United and whether or not there are lobbyists in the Capitol and all of that stuff. It actually has to do with the fact that there is an entire professional class, an entire and not even just us, but like industries that we heavily support, like printing and TV buys and things like that. There is a monetary value, a monetary reason to make certain strategic decisions. Because a lot of the political industry is set up so that the consultants get kickbacks on a certain level of ad buy, or they get kickbacks on a certain or a percentage of the print job that they send out when they send a mailer to a certain number of people. Did that mailer really need to go out? Was that the best strategy to reach people where they are?
Hmm.
Was that the best strategy to have a conversation with the voters? Is it really necessary to have a, $2 million ad buy in and blanket the airwaves? Is that really actually convincing people of things? Or is it because the company who placed that buy got 15% of the ad? And the thing is, you don't necessarily know the answer all the time. I'm not saying that these strategies or these tactics are wrong. They are, there are tried and true methods for reaching people, but are those conversations being had? Are those strategies being made? Are the messages that are going into those things, are they actually being created based off of what the American people need or what a certain community needs, or are they being created because there's an industry behind it and there's a certain group of people who are going to make a certain amount of money off of, putting that ad out there or whatever, or having that issue win, and then you have a friendlier person, for the lobbyist back in the door. It's there's a profit motive to campaigning. And it's been that way, I think. I mean, I'm only 37, but I've been able to kind of do enough research to trace it back at least until the Clinton era, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse over the years. And I think that it creates what one of my friends calls a democracy input problem, in that there is an
I like this.
industry created to talk at the public. It is not created to listen to the public about what they actually need.
Yeah. It's wild. Can you tell me the top 5 people you think, or groups? Um, it,
I'm not going to
that,
do that.
that
I'm not going to name names. I'm not trying.
No, no,
Look,
no, no,
I would
no,
like
not
to.
names, just industries, just like market, the people doing the campaign manager. Just, can you name like the general industry that's
I mean, I think
profiting?
political consulting is the general industry. There are different types of political consultants, right? So there are general consultants like me who are, we do a little bit of everything. We don't specialize in anything. We can help you solve any problem 95% of the way there. And then there are specialty consultants. There are people who only do polls, only do TV buys, only do internet buys, only do, only print mail, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the industry is it's made up of all of us,
Yeah,
and all of us have some level of guilt in it, to some extent. I try really hard to price my services in a transparent way ahead of time. A lot of folks work on percentages. I primarily work on a retainer. And the reason I primarily work on a retainer is because it allows for the candidate to predict how much my services are going to cost at the end. They're not going to get a surprise bill that's like, whatever percentage of some universe that they didn't see. And it also allows me to separate the money that I'm making from the strategic decision that I'm making for that candidate. So if I only need to send 3 mailers, then I only send 3 mailers, because I don't need to send 9 mailers in order to make a certain amount of money off of that campaign. And so I've set up what I can to separate it out and try to lead through this with integrity. But and I'm not trying, I don't want to single out any given person or whatever, but the industry is systematically broken. And it is made to shout at people. It's made to have decisions made in a smoke-filled room on K Street by all those old men in their cigars, and then they blast out $15 billion in advertisements over the course of 2 months, and they're wondering why the American people aren't persuaded. It's dumb. That's dumb.
yeah, yeah. How is this tested? One of the terms that we used in our earlier conversation was that, there's a cognitive dissonance sometimes in doing these campaigns or consulting roles. How, and you've experienced that directly. How has that tested your values?
Yeah, I mean, I
As a
think my job is existential every day. I have sometimes it's better than others, but I am frequently wondering, like, am I part of the problem? Am I, by trying to create a sustainable business model in this industry, am I inherently complicit in this, separation from democracy, this profit motive of democracy we're supposed to be in it for the people. We're supposed to be in it to improve people's lives. We're not supposed to be in it to make money. I run a business. The business has to make money, right? That's how it works, in order to meet payroll and all of these things. So I often have issues with that. And then I also have some, specific deliverables. One of the things that we talked about was the ballot information booklets. So first off, I learned that they do not have them everywhere. And I find that to be really sad, and everyone should demand ballot information booklets from their government, because it is really hard to find the information about what's on your ballot in some places. But in California, every voter is mailed an information packet or an information pamphlet. Sometimes 2, I think, depending on the county. So the county registrar will send you one for all your local races. And then the state Secretary of State's office will send you one for all the statewide races and propositions. And in those pamphlets, you have, the general information of like, okay, these races are up. Here's who is running. Here's what party they are, if it's a partisan race, et cetera, et cetera. And it gives you that basic information. But then on top of that, there is information that is printed in those booklets that is from the campaigns themselves. So each candidate or campaign has the opportunity to make an argument for themselves, which means that, the campaign is writing a deliverable that goes out to the entire voting universe. And I'm talking to every single voter in, whatever district, knowing that this is going out. To be fair, we do pay for it. It is not taxpayer funded. Those pieces, you do not get a statement if you do not pay for it. So the campaign pays for it, but we pay for this thing to go out. And then, I think the question that you asked me when we had the pre-conversation is, do you write them to be honest or do you write them to win? And I write them to win. And I have to live with that. That's my job, is to help this person win. And so now I have very specific standards that I hold myself and my team to that I am proud of. We do not print lies. We don't do, negative campaigning in the sense of like character attacks and whatever, things like that. But that said, your record is your record, and I'm going to tell people what you voted for. I'm going to tell people the money you took. If you did something shitty, people are going to know. And so, some of those, the balancing of how do I present this in the best possible light for my client to give them the best chance of winning, and also not lie, not be a spin doctor. I don't want to be a spin doctor. I was a journalist. That's not how I want to do things. But there are certain talking points you're going to put first. There are certain numbers that you're going to put first. There are certain ways that male candidates are perceived differently than female candidates that are going to make you present it differently. Sure. And so it is, at the heart of it, I do manipulate information to get, as a means to an end. And sometimes that feels shitty.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet. It's got to be a challenge, but sounds like you're trying to do the right thing in a difficult space, right? That makes it, really does test your boundaries sometimes. That's
what I tell myself. And I think, I think I do a decent job. But sometimes you have a swing and a miss. Sometimes you end up in a situation and you just do something and you're like, oh, turns out I'm that person. Who knew? And the longer you're in politics, the more of those situations that you find yourself in, the more every day there's an opportunity for you to do something you wouldn't be proud of. And it's a battle, especially and it's not just a battle for, the candidates, the politicians, the person on the ballot. They get all of the headlines and all that stuff. And that's fine. Credit where credit is due. But those of us who are behind the scenes in the industry face a lot of the same, if not sometimes worse, because there's a lot of things that we can do that the candidates can't. And so you end up finding yourself in potentially shady situations.
Can you give me an example of one of the things that you can do that your candidates can't?
I think like a general easy one is like, it's easier for me to go negative than it is for a lot of my clients. So I can get in the newspaper and I can say Joe Schmo sucks and here's why. And
about the other candidates.
Yeah. Yeah. And
but that's the negative campaigning.
Right. But it gives my client like a level of separation from it because they didn't have to say it. I did. But then it's coming out of my mouth. So now I have to figure out how, like, what I'm going to say about why this person sucks. Is that a legitimate am I giving legitimate information that I think the voters need, or am I just talking shit because I don't like that person or I want to win?
Right. Well, so how do you do when that kind of thing comes up with your team? Do you say, look, we're not doing this type of negative campaigning? Do you say that's too much negative campaigning? Do you say this type is okay here?
Yes. Yeah. So I don't go after people's families. I do not go after their children. I do not go after their, like, dating life or anything like that, unless but then there's, like, I'm not gonna go after your dating life, but if you've been sued for sexual assault, that is an open book, right? That's fine to me because that's maybe something that people should know about their politicians. I'm not gonna go after your finances. I don't care if you've had a bankruptcy. Most people have that make a lot of people have financial troubles, particularly nowadays. That makes you relatable. I'm not gonna use that against you, but did you not pay your taxes for like 3 years? Because that is something maybe the voters should know. It's like there's
Hmm.
a there are things I consider to be public record. Your voting record is, especially if like you're a sitting politician, if you are a sitting elected official, every vote you've ever taken is fair game. And I
Mm-hmm.
will shout that from the rooftops in any way that I need to. There are certain things that people have done in certain jobs, maybe that people need to know. Um, I don't know if you're running for school board, but you've been fired from 3 schools. I have questions, and maybe the voters should too. So it really depends
Hmm.
on the topic and how I'm going to frame the topic, but I think I kind of try to go at it through a journalism lens. If I wouldn't write a story about it, I'm not going to use it on the campaign trail. If I don't think it's real news. Now, of course, that's subjective, but if I don't think it's real news, I don't think that it impacts how you can make a decision or how you can vote or how you can represent the community, then I don't care. I'm not trying to take people down for their lives. We need more normal people in
Yeah.
politics, and normal people have skeletons. But if I think there's a chance it shows who you are and how you can vote, or it has the possibility to impact how you're going to represent the community, then I think it's fair game.
So, if just to paraphrase, it sounds like you're trying to do it more at an intellectual capacity that can educate. I don't know if that's. I'm trying to frame this in a way that helps think about this difficult um, cognitive dissonance at these moments, right, where you want to do it, and like, does it feel that education to the voter is most important, but not at the expense at someone's the things that people hold dear that aren't related to the voting, like their kids and their family and stuff like
Yes.
that.
I think that's generally the line that I'm trying to balance. And
Okay.
to be fair, most of my clients don't like negative campaigning. I'm usually the one pushing for it if it happens at all. And so I don't find myself in a lot of situations in with this example in particular where
Yeah.
like I'm being pushed to do something that I don't want to do. It happens on occasion. Where somebody will bring something to me and I'm like, we're not going to touch that. I will not touch that. And I've had twice, I think, clients who have wanted to use something and I've said I don't want to touch that. And then they push and they push, and then I have to say, if you campaign on that, I will end our contract. Like, I am not going to stand by you while you do that because it's shitty.
Yeah.
Um,
Hey, good
and
for
then I've
you.
seen things done to my candidates, that has been awful. Going after their kids, going after, medical conditions, things like that. That's really difficult to deal with. And then I have to figure out not only how to stand with them as their consultant and like make sure that this thing blows over and that we pivot it to make sure that it's a strength or whatever it is, but also then to be there for them as a person while their life is getting attacked. Not just their political record.
Yeah. It's a challenge. Yeah. That takes a lot of uh, judiciary responsibility in a sense, in being able to think about that in a way that's balances all the things. Um, when it comes to the ballots and what gets written in there, do you think that generally the information in there, knowing what you know, is more helpful than hurtful, more often than not, or is it something? And if not, how do you find ways? how do you think we should be improving? And of course, it's different. The counties and the states are different for every state of all the nuances of this. So I get that. How could we make that process better so that people are getting more educated more often with more impartial information?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It also varies county to county. It's not just in the state. Like, things that would fly in the county of San Diego may not fly in the city of San Diego, right? Different jurisdictions have different controls and different rules for how they do this. So it's and some of them are much more tightly monitored than others. And so I think some of them are frankly doing a better job. I will say am I am 85% confident that the information that makes it into the ballot is technically true 85% of the time, if not 100% of the time. There is a pretty stringent legal process that you have to go through. There's legal review. There are lawsuits. I've been at court more than once over ballot language. There are challenge processes. It's silly season. It's so ridiculous. It's my least favorite time of the cycle, and it's actually coming up here in like 2 months. Oh my God, I'm stressed out already. All right. And so, there are ways that information gets filtered that I think are positive and generally speaking make it so that the information that is coming out is true. That said, it's often lacking context, and it has been sent through the filter of gatekeepers from both campaigns, right? Both sides of a campaign, but then also the elected office or appointed office that filters that information. So that may be a city attorney, it may be the attorney general, it may be, the registrar of voters, whatever. And so you have all of those different human lenses on it, and everybody has an agenda. Everybody on the planet, everybody in politics has an agenda. If you do not have an agenda, you are not like high and
You're not
mighty.
living, goddammit. You're
lazy. I mean, it's just like, what are you doing? You wake up every day and you're just like aimless, and you're just like, what are you doing?
You have to move towards something, right?
Right. Everybody has a thing that they are trying to do. And I think in politics, people say, well, that's a political agenda. Like, it's a negative thing. Like, what's the point of trying to do all of this work if you're not trying to move the world into a certain direction?
Right.
But you don't always know what those agendas are. Right. And I think
and they're not always clear. They may say one thing.
They're not always clear. And I think that is where the problem in the system is that you have these things going through all of these filters with all of these people who have an agenda, and then it gets published with the logo of the county or state or city or whatever that is putting out that thing, and it is presented as if it were neutral information from the government and not information that has been politically manipulated to an end result. And I think that's a problem. I also think, if I'm really honest, I think that nonpartisan races are a lie, and that every race on the ballot should say whether or not they're a D or an R. I think the idea, especially,
I think nonpartisan is just a way to say, like, not Democrat and not Republican, right?
So like in California,
it's their own partisan.
Well, no. If you're running for state or Congress, statewide, like state level, assembly or Senate, or a statewide constitutional officer like governor or Congress or United States Senate, then they are partisan. It tells you on the ballot, Republican or Democrat for every person. If you're running for county supervisor, city attorney, city council, school board, any of that, it does not have the Democrat or Republican on the ballot. And so you're not getting all the information about that person that is relevant to the way that they make decisions. And there is no one who can convince me that somebody runs for office without having some kind of ideological slant to what it is that they're doing.
Sure, a belief system.
So and maybe they're an independent. Fine, cool. Put an I next to it. That will give the voters more information about who this person is and how they're going to make decisions that they do not otherwise get.
Right.
And they have to, the burden is on them to go find the information themselves. So I just think there's a lot more transparency in the process. I think we could also potentially have,
There should be a lot more transparency, you're saying.
yes. And I think it's possible to do. I mean, we could have something not unlike the redistricting commission that reviews these language or something like that. I mean, it's going to cost money, and then there's all this, there's a lot of logistical hurdles to why that may not be possible right this second. But these are not problems that are unsolvable. They're problems that people do not want to solve.
Yeah, I mean, same with the with immigration policy. It seems like no one wants to solve that. Insurance crisis doesn't seem like a lot of people are interested in solving that. They are very interested in the Epstein files and the Comey files, and like things that for some reason distract from real issues in the country. Affordability, insurance, stuff that people deal with day to day. I haven't yet figured it out, and then on top of that, I mean, the ballot, it was a great idea, like the redistricting piece in California, right? To pause that until next term, right? America, by large majority, voted to do that so that they can redistrict. And that it was interesting. I mean, it was a very large win. And the language in the ballot was mostly we don't like Donald Trump, and we're going to fight against Donald Trump. And the whole thing was about, I mean, I don't even remember anything that wasn't about Donald Trump. It was, and I was like, I'm not sure that that's the argument that you want to come with, to go, just because they did it this time. Redistricting happens gerrymandering is every state all the time. We seem to have taken this one very specifically, which I don't know if they determined was anything actually against the law particularly. It was untraditional. And I'm not defending what Texas did, by the way. I don't even know all the nuances about that type of what can and you can't do at the federal redistricting level like that, right? So for the state. So but there was so much language in the ballot that was just like, it didn't seem to focus on the things that really we should be understanding about the impacts of redistricting from a philosophical standpoint, from a morality standpoint. It was just like, Texas did it, we're not going to let us get back at them. All right, let's do it too. I don't know if that's the right approach to take in that way, right? It didn't feel right. That's why I'm agreeing very much. I really aligned with what Arnold Schwarzenegger said. I thought he had a lot of smart things to say about it. He didn't get a lot of good review for that, but that was my feeling on it. What did you think about that whole process here in California?
Well, so I think that first off, your definition of right is confusing, because is it the right thing to print if you want to win? Apparently, right? If that's your goal, right? If that's, so I think there's that piece. I mean, I think the Prop 50 thing was really interesting to me for one very specific reason. And that's because I think it showed that the voters are not stupid. Because poll after poll shows support for the Independent Redistricting Commission. The voters like the Independent Redistricting Commission. The voters understand why districts should be drawn by Independent Redistricting Commission. They got it. And then they turned around and voted for Prop 50 overwhelmingly, because they can hold two thoughts in their minds at the same time, which a lot of times our industry does not give people credit for. It thinks the voters are stupid. And so that's part of why you get this like broadcasting, talking at people situation, is because there's this assumption that people just don't understand. And I would disagree. I think that the polling versus the results show that the voters understood the assignment, and that the voters knew what they were doing, and they knew why they were doing it. And whether you agree on why they're doing it, they were holding both of those thoughts in their head at the same time.
How do you know how do you know the why? How do you know that they knew the why?
Because everybody has their own why.
Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, because all of these polls, I mean, the Independent Redistricting Commission polls in the 60s, And then Prop 50 passed overwhelmingly. And so, these things were, I mean, they were measured very close to each other. And so you have the voters saying, no, I actually really like this, but I'm going to vote to destroy it for a second. And I think that piece,
yeah.
I think, shows complexity and nuance in the voters. I can't read everybody's mind, but the data mismatch shows complexity in the voters that I think they do not always get credit for.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good take on it. I don't know. My feeling is that a lot of voters don't get, because it was so Donald Trump heavy, front heavy, it made it like a vengeful bill and not a look, there's a lot of ways of solving that problem, right? Someone could draw 20 ways of solving that problem. I struggled to, it was hard for me to determine that this was the right one based on, and that language is important because it pushes people to feel a certain way about a system. So we're gonna be less democratic for a little while. We're gonna reduce our democracy here for a little while, in hopes of the promise that it'll come back in order to defeat the bad guys, who are Texas and Donald Trump. That was, to me, the meat of that whole bill. I spoke to a number of politicians about it. I got the same feel, and it felt, and I guess, based on what you're saying, is that you feel that there was depth of thought. My feeling is that there was not a philosophical approach to thinking about that bill from a long-term standpoint. Will they bring the redistricting commission back? We moved on anger and hate and vengefulness over here in California over what I think was probably a better long-term strategy. Even if by the way, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with anything Texas did, Donald Trump, none of that. It just comes down to, like, how are you trying to solve this problem, with what attitude, and with it's the approach, right? Like we've talked about. And so it was still a struggle for me to see. And then it won by such a large amount. I have found it difficult for people to, when it comes to having a nuanced conversation, the first thing that comes up is, how do you like Donald Trump, liar, blah, blah. I'm like, how can anyone like that guy or whatever? And it's like, can we talk about the issue?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, I think you're correct in what the approach was. And I think, I mean, to be fair, Gavin didn't hide from that. This was his idea. He did it for a reason, not the least, or for several reasons, not the least of which is that he wants to run for president. And, whatever.
Nothing's better than hating Donald Trump from California if you're going to run for president.
What I will say, though, is that asking for that level of nuance from people is really difficult for a couple of reasons. The first is that people are struggling to survive right now. They are not having their Maslow's hierarchy of needs met. And so, like, they are not feeling safe. They do not have homes over their heads. They do not have healthcare. They do not have food security. They do not have basic things that allow human beings to make smart decisions and to demand. I'm not saying the decision wasn't smart. I'm saying that they don't have the ability to demand the level of nuance out of their elected leaders that they should. The second thing is that our information infrastructure is fucked, and it has been for decades. And so this is where some of my journalism background comes in. You have two sides of a coin. On one side of the coin, you have all mainstream media, for lack of a better word, is funneled through like 5 companies, right? And they're all owned by billionaires, and some of them are owned by people who are not American. And I'm not saying that to be nationalistic. I'm saying that as a point of fact about where people get their information about the American political system, right? So, their agenda from like a class standpoint alone is not the same as the everyday American's agenda. So there's that on the mainstream media side. And then you have, on the other side of this, the social media internet world that has been built over the last couple of decades. And in that world, every single human being has their own algorithm. And your algorithm says the sky is blue, and my algorithm says the sky is orange. How are we supposed to have, the same view of what it is to be an American if we don't even have the same view of what color the sky is, let alone a conversation about the fact that most of the time the sky is blue, but at sunset, sometimes it's orange, right? And so you have these two things. So on one side, you have propaganda, and on the other side, you have brainwashing that puts people in their own personal bubble of intaking information. And then you have the consistent erosion of public education and critical thinking, civic skills, and things like that in the public education system, which has been happening for decades and was purposeful. It
Oh, that's sad.
what people don't have the tools. They don't have the tools. They're not given the tools to create a life for themselves that allows them to make rational decisions, and then on top of that have the intellectual capacity to have those deeper conversations. That said, I see deeper conversations on the internet, in the comments section, in some situations than I ever see on Fox News or that I hear on most podcasts. People are smarter than we give them credit for, but they're being purposely locked out of the system and purposely not given the information they need to make good decisions.
Yeah. Civic, I just had a conversation earlier, just even about civics understanding and education. It's like, what percentage of people know what a county supervisor is?
Right.
And that is such an important role. It is like, and especially in LA, they manage more people than a senator, a state senator, are under their jurisdiction. The mental health department is in Los Angeles County. Like, there's so many things they do, and they have so much power. And I guess it's the least, like, I don't even know if you said name the levels of people that represent you, if someone would name a county supervisor. The average person would name a county supervisor. My question to you is this: what percentage of people know what would name a county supervisor if you said who represents you?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I've not. I
It's a
I have a
litmus
hard
test
time
on
answering.
civic education.
I know, I get it, but
Yeah.
I have a hard time answering questions like that because I live in a bubble. I have to acknowledge that about myself, and that's one of those cognitive dissonance things that I have to
Sure.
battle with constantly, is that I live in a political bubble where everybody knows everything all the time. And like the
Must be
what
nice.
the average person looks like is not, and their understanding of politics is not something that I've fully grasp, and I have to take some humble pie when it comes to that because
Yeah.
maybe they know, maybe they don't. I don't think they know. I mean, to be fair, I work in politics, and when I moved to Richmond, I lived in Richmond for an entire year before I knew what city council district I lived in. I showed up to vote, and I was like, "Oh,
Yeah. Well,
oops."
and a lot of times it's if you're not concerned with certain things, then sometimes it doesn't matter if you do know it. I guess it only matters when you start pointing fingers and applying blame, right? And the people to point fingers and apply blame tend to be the biggest people. So it's like whoever's got the biggest mouthpiece and has the biggest influence, usually a state senator, some senator with a big mouth, or some congressman, or the president, the governor.
Yeah,
No one hears from the treasurer of, Fiona Ma. How many people know who Fiona Ma is? And she's,
right.
she's managing the money. It's pretty important.
I
But
would argue, I think people figure it out when they need something, and I don't think that's necessarily the wrong approach. When government is functioning properly, you shouldn't have to think about it. And so I think, there is an element of people taking for granted that the government's going to do what it's supposed to do. I
yeah,
could argue that they should not, but I think that I think that that is a fair assumption, that in a democratic republic that, the government will look out for you. And I think when people need something, then they figure out who they need to reach out to, or they reach out to the wrong person, right? Like, you need a constituent service, for example, and you call your congressperson, and they're like, actually, that's your council member. Here's the phone number. And then they navigate the system from that direction. I
yeah,
mean, I wish people understood local government more. Not just because that's like my passion, but because it is where most of the decisions are made that impact your life every day.
yeah,
Whether or not
right,
your community has a grocery store or a hospital, or your school is funded, or, you know, there are
yeah,
jobs available to you within a reasonable commute. That's all local government.
right,
And, I wish people paid more attention to that, but they partially don't because of the political industrial complex, because the money is in the big races. The industry is set up to use the presidential race as the big, like, it's a feast and famine situation. And the presidential race is the big kahuna. That's the cycle where everyone makes money, and that's the race that everyone makes the most money off of. So everything starts there. If my working theory is that if the political industry was set up genuinely to support democracy rather than to just make money, then it would actually, the funding and the messaging would go from the bottom up, because it would be focused on the council members and the mayors and the district attorneys and the supervisors and the folks who are in the communities, drive those streets, knock those doors, meet those people, and have the ability to identify what issues in the community are, versus the president. Like, like him or hate him, Donald Trump is not going to come knocking on your door to see what's wrong. You know,
he's also not in charge of the trash in front of your building.
He's not. And so there's that element of like, if this system were set up to actually hear people, then the big important races would be the ones at the bottom.
Yeah. Hey, I'm into that. And I'm into having some humble pie. I think that's another good thing that you said that I think is a good note to leave on. As you know, my role here is in Meyerside Chats just to bring these kind of thoughts together, educate people, have an impartial conversations the best we can in order to destroy this us and them narrative that happens, that gets people divorcing their families. And it's really sad. So I started this journey 4 years ago, so I can do that. So when I always tell people, you don't have to believe it that hard. You could believe it. You just don't have to believe it that hard. You're very far removed from the room where it happens,
Yeah.
But I want to thank you for your time, your knowledge and expertise, and for sharing here today. I value this conversation and the time we have together. This was great. I've learned some things as well. And anything last words you want to say to the world? And of course, how do people find you if they need your services?
I guess my last words to the world are, thanks, Nick. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I called you by the wrong name. And then you can find me at evincostrategies.com, EVINCO strategies.com, and I have a 15-minute free call for anybody who is interested and thinks they might want to run for office. And we can talk about it, and I can help you try to navigate that without ruining your life or selling your integrity.
There you go. Hey, you want to run for office? You know who to contact. Eva Posner right here, Evinco Strategies. No. All right. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks.
Take care. Bye.